Hi everyone, and welcome to this week's Moments video, where we focus on documenting the significant stories in our lives. Today I'm creating a page that documents a turning point in the history of my relationship with my husband. I'll be making a custom striped background and using chipboard frames to create a unique photo mat. So let's get started. This month's garden theme is all about history, so I thought it would be a great opportunity to tell the story behind this picture, which was a selfie that I took with my husband, who was then just my boyfriend, way back in 1990. As you can probably tell from my very overprocessed hair. But anyway, we dated the last 2 years of high school, and we took this photo the day before I left to go to college. He still had 1 year of high school left, and since I was going to school almost 800 miles away, we weren't sure exactly where our relationship would go. So on the day we took this photo, we talked about our hopes for the future and what was going to happen to us. And eventually, everything we talked about came true. So I'd like to get the memories of that day down on paper, since it ended up being a pretty significant part of our beginnings. I'm going to start with this paper pad from American Crafts. It is from the #Summer collection, and it's got a lot of happy, bright, summery colors and patterns. I know that typically heritage or history pages tend to use more subdued or vintagey colors, but since those aren't really my style, I'm sticking to what I enjoy working with, which is brighter, bolder products. And besides, this photo was taken at the end of summer, so it's not really off base to choose products with a summery theme. I've grabbed a piece of cardstock to start, and my idea is to create a diagonally striped background using a variety of colors and patterns from this paper pad. Since my photo is black and white, I'm really free to choose anything that catches my eye. So I'm going to flip through here, and I'm thinking of starting with some of these more solid patterns that aren't too busy. Something kind of like this green dot, or maybe this aqua herringbone. I'm going to be mixing multiple colors, so I don't want the patterns to be too crazy or busy. So I've selected some of the papers and cut them into strips to lay diagonally across the background. And I've picked out blue, pink, green, and then a few yellow patterns, and I'm just lining them up to fill the page. Now I cut all these strips off camera just for the sake of time, but here in a sec I will show you how I did that. So this is really simple. I've got a few scraps of paper to use, and I'll start with the longest strip that goes across the center of the layout. I'm using a clear ruler, and I'll line it up from corner to corner, just kind of eyeballing it. And then I'll use my craft knife to cut down one side of the ruler and then cut down the other side. Just like that. And there I have my first stripe. So to cut the next one, I've got this scrap of yellow paper, but you could use a whole piece of paper. You just line up your first strip across the top of the paper, and then align your ruler on the edge and cut along it just like that. And there's your second stripe. So I'll just keep cutting each progressive stripe and spin this around. And I'm just using the width of my ruler as the guide. My ruler is about 1.5 inches, but you could make your strips wider or skinnier just depending on your ruler. Now that I have all of my stripes cut, I'm just going to start adhering them to this piece of cardstock as my background. And I'll start down at this lower corner and just work my way across the page. Now I've finished adhering all the stripes to the background, so I can start arranging the rest of my elements. I'll probably have the photo front and center, but I do want to separate it from this really colorful background so it doesn't get lost in all the bright stripes. I've grabbed this big stack of chipboard frames, and these are from the Maggie Holmes style board line. And I'm thinking of layering a few of them underneath my photo just to make a kind of funky asymmetrical photo mat. The chipboard will add just a bit of dimension to pop up the photo, and I think that some of these more neutral colored ones will contrast against the really colorful background and be a nice frame for my photo, really establish it as the focal point. I'm just going to keep playing with the arrangement of these frames until it looks somewhat balanced with my photo. Kind of have some overlapping. I like a few of the edges sticking out, but I think that looks pretty good. So I'm going to set these other frames aside, and right now I'm thinking that the stripes are still just a little bit overpowering. So I think I'm going to pull this grouping off of my page for just a second and set it aside. Just move it over there. And I'm going to grab a sheet of 12 by 12 vellum, and I'm just going to layer it over the top. And I think this will help soften up the colors and the brightness. Then I'll just bring the frames and photo back over here, like so. I'm thinking a good way to adhere this vellum would be to add some rows of machine stitching, maybe along the diagonal lines of these stripes. And then the stitching would be both functional, and then it would hold the vellum to the background, and it would also add just a little bit of texture. To keep things from looking too soft and washed out, I think I'd like to bring some color to the photo and frame layer. I've quickly cut a few squares of scrap paper just to tuck in behind my frames, and I want to get an idea of what this might look like. These are just leftover papers that I had when I cut the stripes, and I'm just going to tuck some of them in here to see what it might look like. And yeah, I think that works. I've got a pretty colorful background, but it's toned down a bit with the vellum, and then these bright papers within the frames really draw your eye to the photo. So I think I'll go ahead and commit to this concept and stitch my vellum down. I use just a little bit of adhesive to hold the vellum in place while I'm stitching it, but I put the adhesive right where the frames and the photo are going to go, so you won't see it on the final layout, it'll be covered up. I'm using a zigzag stitch with some white thread that just runs along the seams of the stripes. So not only will the stitching add a little bit of texture, it will also cover up any gaps from imperfect cutting, and it will really help finish off the look of this background. I finished off my background with that stitching, so next I'm going to build up the frames and photo layer. I still haven't adhered anything yet, just in case I want to swap some of these papers out or switch out a color. I just want to lay them out to get an idea of how much of the page they'll take up and how the colors are working together. And then once I have that arrangement figured out, I can know how much room I have for my title and my journaling. So as I continue to mess around with this arrangement, putting the photo in the middle here, I'm thinking about maybe taking out this smallest frame and just leaving the 4 larger ones. That way, that leaves a good space here for my title. And I've already cut out a few titles on my silhouette. These are from the brushed title set that I designed for this month's digital shop. I originally cut it out of white cardstock, but I thought this might be just a little bit too light and airy. So I went back in to the file and I outlined the original one, and it made it just a little bit bolder. Then I cut it out again out of this pink dotted paper. And I haven't totally ruled out the white title yet, but I'm leaning towards this pink one just because it seems to be a better fit. Next, I want to think about my journaling, and since the story I want to tell is pretty lengthy, I'm thinking that hidden journaling is the way to go, just so I don't have to worry about squeezing the words into a space on the page. I've got this plain manila tag and I plan to write my journaling on it and then just slip it behind one of these frames. That way I don't have to edit my words to fit into the design. So I think I'll go ahead and write my journaling on the tag and then grab some embellishments, and I'll come back and we will finish off this page. You can see I used the tag to hold my journaling, and I ended up writing on both sides. As I mentioned before, I think I'll slip it behind one of these frames where it can just be pulled out when you want to read it. Probably will tuck it in behind there. Now I think I'm ready to lay out some of my embellishments. I've printed out a sheet of the Be Colorful printable, and I think some of these smaller circle tags and tabs could be worked into the design. I'm also looking at this blue card, and I think it might be nice within one of the frames. I'm just going to grab some scissors and quickly cut it out, just to see what it might look like in place of that aqua paper that I've got there now. I'm going to swap it out, and I'll tuck that back in there. I really like how those sketched flowers and that watercolor background add a little bit more detail than the herringbone, so I think I'm going to leave that in there. So now for my title. This die cut is looking a little bit flat compared to the other dimensional elements on the page. So I'd like to incorporate these chipboard thickers, which are almost the same color as the paper. And I think that might help give the title just a little bit more pizzazz. I've grabbed some letters to spell out the word here's, and I'm going to add it right above the die cut. So the title will end up saying, "Here's the story." I'll add a little apostrophe there. And I might, slide this yellow frame down just a little bit. You can see I'm constantly adjusting and moving things during the design process. I always like to have everything fitting together and in its place before I commit to that adhesive. So now for the fun part. I've grabbed some embellishments to play with. These are chipboard shapes from the Studio Calico Basics line. I've got stars and hearts in yellow, pink, and blue. And the colors are perfect for my page. So I thought I'd try to arrange some of these shapes around my photo just to fill in some of these little corner nooks. Got some of the little blue stars here. I'm going to mix a couple of the sizes down in this corner, like so. And I've also got a few of the 2Ps Flare in the same color palette. And I'm trying to arrange my embellishments by color, so I was going to group all of the yellow ones all up here and the pinkish ones here and the blue ones down in the corner. I tend to do this a lot, but I think an embellishment grouping has more impact if it has a common element that tie them all together, which in this case is color. I think that blue badge down in the corner is looking just a bit too dark. So I think I'm going to try this circle tag from the printable instead. I'm just really roughly cutting it out. And if it works here, which I think it does, I'll go back and trim it out more neatly in a little bit. But I think this is looking pretty good. Although I might, let's see. I think I might add just one more little file tab, like maybe this blue one from the printable. I'm going to cut it out. I think it might work like up there or maybe on the side. But overall, I like this arrangement. So I think I'm going to adhere these things down. And then when I come back, we'll do some final little bits of embellishment and look at the completed page. So now I've got everything adhered down, and you can see I ended up adding just a few more tiny embellishments to the mix. I went back and I trimmed out these two printable tags. and I stapled this one to the photo with my tiny attacher. And this one I punched out with a circle punch so it would have clean edges. And in addition to the Studio Calico chipboard, I added a few little sequins and enamel dots for some sparkle. I also slipped my journaling tag in behind this frame. In order to keep it from sliding too far down behind the frame, I put a row of foam squares along the bottom edge, which will stop it from sliding any further. And then I also put some of the foam squares along the sides as well. So there's a little pocket in there in which the tag can sit securely. And it might be a little hard to tell, but I also sprayed the die cut title with a light coat of magenta ink just to deepen it up a bit. It's just a little bit darker than the pink that's up in this frame, and I like the little punch that gives it. So that's the completed page that documents an important part of my history, and here's a look at the layout and some of the up-close details. Thanks so much for joining me for this week's Moments video. I hope you've been inspired to document a moment in your own history. For more videos, inspiration, and scrapbook supplies, be sure to check out 2peasinabucket.com. Bye for now.